Bismillah, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wasallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So last week, we left off with the death of Abu Talib, the Prophet's uncle. And we talked about some of the things that were happening post the boycott. Today we're going to focus on the passing of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, the Prophet's wife. And so we're in the 10th year of prophethood now. There's hadith that speak about the passing of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha being something that happens 3 years prior to the migration to Medina. And there's different insights on whether Abu Talib passes away before Khadija or after Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. Some would say that it's in that kind of 40-day range prior to, and some would say 40 days after. And to understand how this gets articulated in these ways, the Meccan society that we've been talking about so far has been filled with a lot of persecution, a lot of tribulation, migration, right? But they're not in a place where they're ever in the authority, so to speak. Even in Abyssinia, where they have kind of a satellite space rooted in sanctity and safety, which are really important things in the development of a society. If somebody can capture your safety, like your sense of well-being, they can control you. If they control your access to food, right? This is what they were trying to do to them in the boycott, right? This is what Surah Quraysh is about. الَّذِي يَطْعَمَهُم مِّن جُوعٍ وَآمَنَهُم مِّن خَوْفٍ. Right? Allah is the one that feeds you and gives you protection from like this fear. There's a safety that's attached to it, right? Or when they have the advent into Medina for the first time, this is what the Prophet tells people in his first khutbah to them in Medina, essentially. Right? He tells them 4 things. And the first 2 he says is afshu salam, like spread salam, like peace, right? And he says like feed the people who are hungry, because those are 2 really critical variables in the development of just a healthy community. And as minorities, they didn't have any of this. But understanding why in the Meccan period, we're going to be in a place where we have some of these different understandings. Did this person pass at this time or that time? There was no fundamental reason for them to record it. Do you know? The Muslims are not in like the power kind of dynamic that they run the society. And if anything, they're grossly underprivileged. They're now in a place where like known members of society are converting to Islam. Umar ibn al-Khattab, Hamza radiallahu an, like they are bringing their sense of clout. The numbers are increasing, but they're still in a place where they're not in charge, and they're living through real tribulation. They're not going to sit down and take like account of all of these things in real time. Do you see what I mean? So Abu Talib, he has a gap of about a month to a month and a half, like 40 days, right? 35, 40 days. He passes either before or after Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. And this is after they've gone through this multi-year boycott where a lot of them are experiencing a lot of challenges. If you didn't like with us last week, it's up online. Also, like the entirety of it that we've been going through is up online. We've been looking at the Meccan part of the Seerah for probably about a year now. And we're like 3 years away from starting the Medinese part, right? So now we're in this 10th year after Hijrah. You want to think about what some of these things mean, right? A decade of prophethood means the Prophet's been doing this thing for 10 years now. For 10 years, he's been inviting people to Islam. For 10 years, he's been propagating in a public way. He's been propagating for like 7 to 8 years because that first phase was done in secrecy. And then the command came down to invite people publicly. He's in a place where he's experienced all of these things of kind of challenges, tribulation. He's seeing his companions being boycotted and beaten and abused and even killed for following his teachings. It's a lot to hold all at once, let alone like simultaneously still having to do everything he's doing as like he's witnessing his children pass before he passes, you know, as he's experiencing his community turn him out. And now he's not only experienced the loss of his uncle, but of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. And Khadija is arguably like the person who's with him from day one of all of this. And you don't want to take talks and lectures that you've heard that are very like surface level engagement, but to think deeply about the content that you've been given and what you know about this woman and the critical role she played in the Prophet's life, and how it wasn't that she was elevated simply because of his goodness, alayhi salam, but she is a good person on her own accord. Do you know? And she's in a place where what she brings of her character, her nobility, and not nobility in terms of lineage, but just nobility in terms of demeanor, like nobility in terms of temperament, everything that she does, like he loses her after 10 years. If you can think back months ago, we said that there were some different opinions on when the Prophet and Khadija actually get married to each other, but most would say that the Prophet was how old when they got married? Do you remember? 25. And how old was she? 40. So now in the 10th year after Hijrah, or sorry, the 10th year of Revelation, right? How old are all of they then at this point?
35 and then 50.
No. So he got prophethood at 40, right? So they were already married for 15 years, right?
So they would been married for 25 years.
Yeah. So she is, and he is, right? It's great. Amazing.
We're not great at math.
Yeah. Look at that. Oh, man. 33 and 60? Who said that? Yeah. I feel so great about myself right now. So this is not happening in a vacuum, right? Do you know anybody who's 65 years old in your life? Right? Your grandmother's 65 years old, okay? Like most people, when we think of people at that age, like I am turning 42 this year. My parents are in their 70s, right? Allah grant them ease in their old age. But an understanding now that she's 65 years old, Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, and she went through the boycott from the time she was like 62 or 63 until she's 65. Why is she doing this? And we know her from all the things that we know about her, right? So Khadija is a merchant, she's wealthy, right? She gives all of her money during this period of the boycott, like bankrupts herself. As a 65-year-old woman, she's gone through multiple years now where they are simply eating like the leaves off of trees. They're boiling straps of leather and eating this. Is that something that any person can kind of deal with, let alone somebody who is 65 years of age? And think about it societally from the standpoint of what a Meccan Arabia was like 14 centuries ago. Do you know? Where you don't have access to antibiotics and medications. You don't have like air conditioning or plumbing. You don't have like the stuff that we have. So when you're trying to contextualize and understand the relationship of the Seerah to the Quran and how it makes it concrete, and you start to think about some of the things we talked about as trends and themes within the prophetic biography, like conviction, belief, iman, these are important things. And they have actual iman in something. They're not just Muslim because they inherited it. Do you know? Like, who did she inherit Islam from? She is arguably the first convert to Islam. She's the first like companion that's given the glad tidings of Jannah. Do you know? So she's already been told, right? Like the Prophet is told by Jibreel that, like, tell Khadija salams are extended to her. Give her the glad tidings of Jannah. Tell her she's going to have a home in Jannah that's essentially a palace that is like fashioned out of a giant pearl and jewels. Do you know? And she knows this, and she still bankrupts herself. Like, you already have it. Why are you doing more? Do you see? But it's not a transactional relationship. If I do this, how much will I get in return? If I did this, like, what will I get from it as a result, right? Love is the basis of her relationship with the Prophet of God. How could her relationship with Allah not be about love also? And when she's now in a place of choosing what has to be done, she's just doing what's right simply because it's the right thing to do. I want you to take a couple of minutes because, to me, I think one of the most important people in the Seerah literature is Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. And we know, like, hadith that talk about, the four best women ever created, and Maryam, uh, uh, Asiya, Khadija, and Fatima. Like, may Allah be pleased with all of them. Right? These are not like people who we don't know things about, but now bridging the idea of what we know and how we act upon what we know. Like, what were things that made her who she was? She was clearly very sacrificial, right? She gave all her stuff away to like save people at a time when people were really suffering. Do you know what I mean? Right? In this boycott, she's doing it as she's approaching an age of debilitation. Do you know? Like, I hung out with a bunch of guys that I went to college with the other day, and they're all my age, and they're talking about like how their backs hurts all the time, and sometimes they just have to lay down, like, and their wives have to like drag them places. I'm like, man, what's it wrong? You're 40 years old, bro. Do you know? The Prophet is 50 at this point, and he's still a physically strong person. Like, there's things that he does rooted in his sense of wellness that enable him to, guys, you can make a Jama'ah. You don't have to pray on your own. Yeah. Can we move up so we're making room for people? Can you guys move in this way? Maybe we could fill in the room going here. Yeah.
It died.
It's okay. Is there, you want to tell us, Sam?
I just turned it on. It's like I just put on the charger.
So what I'd like for you to do is, because like the Prophet ﷺ is the best of creation. We know this, you know, and his character is impeccable. May Allah give us a character like his. I don't want you to think about their relationship in ways that we validate certain things that like are very real and they should be there. The Prophet, as a young man, married a woman who is substantially older than him, you know, and the Seerah makes things concrete. So you got to challenge norms that come into the way that essentially like limit things because we believe men should only be older than women when they get married to them or whatever. That's not like our religion. Do you know? And if you encourage your friends to do this kind of stuff or think about things that don't make sense, like if Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha is 40 years old, right? Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, later on, she says like the Prophet is like, he talks and remembers Khadija all the time. Do you know? And one of the reasons why he speaks about how much he loves her, amongst like many reasons, is he says, she gave me like most of my children, right? She's a 40-year-old woman. Do you know? And you hear these kind of nonsensical things from people because we live in a consumer-driven society that teaches us to have what we want, the way we want it, exactly how, but also makes us dissatisfied with what's in front of us. Do you know? And there's a problem that we can talk about in a little bit. But like, you don't want to think about Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha only in those ways, in addition to those ways. The same way when we talked about Umar radiallahu anh, and people tend to think about him just as like this like ferocious, physically strong man. And I said, well, how often do you think about Umar as one of the few people who knew how to read and write during that time? How often do you think about Umar as somebody who was known as a poet and for his intellectual capacity? How often do you think about Umar as having a father who was abusive of him and what that did in terms of putting trauma into his own heart? Do you see what I mean? Right? And we create one dimensions of like complex, not difficult to understand, but multifaceted individuals that we can extrapolate so much more from their narratives if we reflect upon it. This is a woman who the prophet is saying is one of the best women ever created, which also means she's one of the best humans ever created. We don't want to gloss over her biography, nor do we want to be in a place where we say she's only an exemplar or a role model for people who are also women. That's like foolishness, do you know? So what I'd like for you to do is just take a couple of minutes, turn to the persons next to you. What are some of the things that you take away from the life of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha? Like the things you know about her, her characteristics, her values, her ethics, like stories, narratives that we know of her, but we think critically and deeply about, that we can extrapolate from it and then think how we execute and implement that in the course of our own life. Do you know what I mean? This is like our mother, Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. Do you know? Like, you got to know who she is. Do you know what I mean? And she plays such a pivotal role in so many ways. But in terms of just like a good person, the companions are more tangible for us at times because we can find ourselves in the narratives of people who are like slipping and making mistakes. Do you know? Khadija offers to us an insight also that she's not a prophet of God, but she still has capacity to be this good of a human being, right? I want that for myself. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's what I would want to aspire towards. That level of ethic, that level of value. It's not going to work if I only think about this in ways that are very kind of surface level, or stories that I don't then think out within the frame of historical context. This is an actual person that lived. What can I take from her existence? What can I take from who she was as a person? Do you see what I mean? So we can turn to the persons next to us and talk about this a bit. Like, what is it that I can take from her life, as we are now at this part in the Meccan Seerah where she has passed away? And we'll come back and discuss. But go ahead, like, talk to the persons next to you, and then we'll talk it out.
She felt like, hey, you know what? You're something special. Yeah. So she's separated, right? But then sometimes trying to be the sleep for better half or like kind of like I gotta have yeah. Right, and it's like you might not see it, you might get like little sadness. It's like having that. And that's so true. So it's like I'm not saying how can you do that in like modern day?
Oh, thank you.
Just I didn't know. It was like 15 inches.
Was there a lot of people upstairs?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, good.
What's the prompt?
You could have done that.
Gold.
Sit on her business.
Come on. Sorry, man. We have that in common. I watch too much TikTok. I don't want to put more. Oh yeah, that too. Obviously. Literally a woman that's having all the she's not going to this. She literally said, I like it, I want it, I get it. Also, she literally was in this dish, I like it, I want it, I get it. No, that's literally what happened. Like, she like crossed the house, she wants to see with him. Yeah. And then they got married. And she never was called her grandma. Yeah, she never was that. And also like sign. Her name Khadija means premature. Yes, her name means premature, and it's not very like it's a very rare name. It's just like how Prophet Muhammad Prophet's name is very rare. He like didn't like the whole Arabian Peninsula. It was only like the word Muhammad. So there's that. And Prophet Muhammad like they included from time yeah, like it's yeah, there we go. It's like
Something overlooking like so many times
so you can think about that and why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choose Khadija name as Khadija? Why premature Islam? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, I
Okay. What are some of the things that we're coming up with? What do we discuss? Like somebody comes to you and says, "Why do Muslims admire this woman so much?" You know, what would you tell them? What do we take from her life? You want to say something? Did you have your hand raised? Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Or anybody? Yeah, anybody want to say something? Yeah, go for it.
Her strength, but also her faith beyond just faith in herself and God, but also Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I was thinking about the Cave of Hira. When I saw it, I decided not to climb it because it seemed too hard and it was going to be at night and I didn't feel like I could do it. And then they told us that that's what she did. She would go up and down and bring him things and all of these things in the dark, in the light, whatever. And I was thinking about him looking at it, but I was thinking also of her looking at it because I was imagining an elderly woman climbing that. So thinking about her, it's like strength, physical, but also mental.
Yeah, because if she's 15 years older than him and he gets revelation at 40, then she's 55, right? I'm not going to ask you because that was not a good conversation before, you know? So 55, even lunar years, right, is still like in your early 50s. Do you know what I mean? Climbing up and down that mountain with stuff, you know, not just like I'm going up and down the mountain, I got a bottle of water and I'm going up and you know you're coming right back down. But she's climbing it with no stairs embedded in, no like pathways for cars. Do you know? What is she doing? Like, what is motivating her? What's the intentionality that's rooted in this? Do you see what I mean? What else? What else do we take away? Yeah.
There's a common teaching these days that if you take care of someone else, you need to take care of yourself first as a caregiver. And this was the exact opposite, that she was so self-sacrificing and took care of other people.
Yeah. Or maybe that's the source of her self-care, right? Like what it does for your heart to be in service of others, not in a way that is without mindfulness of capacity, but what you can gain from doing for others is not the same as what you can gain from just doing for yourself only. Do you know? And that like sacrificial nature is remarkable. She like literally gave all of it away. Do you know? And we know a lot like honor is crazy. Do you know what I mean? Like Musab ibn Umair is a companion of the Prophet that we'll talk about at some point, and he's like an emissary of the Prophet, and he's like a young man who is well known in the community and he's got the best clothes and fragrances, and people want to marry him. From like all these women know he's an eligible bachelor. He converts to Islam, has like difficult time with his mother. Do you know? And not to go into the story in too much detail, but he passes in the battle of Uhud. He's from the Shuhada of Uhud. And at Uhud, his job is to be the standard bearer. He holds the flag of Islam in the battle. And as he's engaged in the tide of the battle turns in Uhud, like the Muslims lose. And essentially what happens is there's archers that are stationed to cover the Muslim army, and they're told not to move, and they do. They go towards like spoils of war that are on the battlefield. And Khalid ibn Walid and Ikrama, the son of Abu Jahl, neither of them are Muslim at this time. And they essentially flank from both sides, and the tide turns. And Musab ibn Umair, he like goes into the battlefield. And, you know, they fight him and they sever his arm and he puts the flag in the other arm. They sever that arm. He's holding it between the stubs of his limbs, right? They're like attacking him blow for blow, that to literally mutilate his body, right? And he still wouldn't let the banner of Islam fall. Do you know? And when the Prophet comes upon him, they say that all Musab ibn Umair has now in his possession is a sheet, that when they cover his face with it, his feet get exposed. And when they cover his feet with it, his face gets exposed. So the Prophet says to cover his face, and he places some branches of a tree on his feet, right? And he says, like in those moments, that he remembers this young man who had like everything of the world, wealth, perfumes, like women saw him as the most eligible bachelor. and he leaves the world with just a sheet that can't even cover his whole body, right? Man mata ala shay bu'ithat alayh, the hadith says that whosoever dies on a thing is resurrected on that thing. Khadija's honor is not that she was a wealthy merchant. Her honor is that she left this world with nothing. You see? Like she gave all of it away for the right reasons. Do you know? How many people lived because she bankrupted herself during this boycott? Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? Right? And whose heart is like opening in the midst of that? Right? Like, what does somebody have to look like for me to not be there for them? What country of origin, what skin color, what race does someone have to be so that I'm not assisting them? Do you know how much wealth do they need to have or not have that I'm not then providing for them kind of the things that I provide for other people? What else do we take away from her life, her existence? Yeah.
I think the point of like doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Like, just, like I feel like really like resonating with me because Islam teaches that you do things not because like what's in it for you, but like because it's the right thing to do. And, like we'll all be like for the betterment, right? And I think in today's context, like a lot of times, and like when we look at like movements that are like trying to like make like things better for like everyone around the world, I feel like it's like women usually like lead a lot of like these things, and I feel like as a man, like I think about like the best woman in Islam, she's like so selfless, and I feel like as a man, it's like our responsibility to like provide stability to society and like help like push these things forward. But like a lot of times like we're not like in the public like of these things to like provide stability to like the communities and like to like these like movements, and I feel like we have like such a perfect religion that like teaches us that these things are so important because like the sacrifices that one woman gave, like it's helped like billions of people like being like Muslim today. Like another example I think about is like now there's like this like controversy on like TikTok about like like Palestinians, like like some people and like the movement being like racist or whatever, right? And then like the black community is like we're not supporting them because like at the end of the day we're gonna benefit from it. We're supporting them because it's the right thing to do, right? And I feel like like in this country we've seen that like a lot where like the black community has like really helped like a lot of these like groups like and it's helped like all of us like be better. When you think about it, you're like there's like 6 billion like black and brown people, and if we all live life the way Islam teaches us, and it's like really like easy to like if we can like make the world like a better place in terms of like what Islam thinks the world should be, it's just so easy for us, but we're not willing to like sacrifice like things unless there's something in it for us. And I feel like the story you told about like Khadija, like she's like given up like so much, and it's like helped like make the world like so much better. And I feel like it's just like strong reminder for like the little things that we can do, and like we just like choose to call ourselves like Muslim.
Yeah, and you think about relationships or transactional. I don't want to talk more than I want to hear. What else did you guys take away? I'm sorry, I can talk. You know.
What were you gonna say?
No, I will. I'll say it. Yeah. No, but I mean, in thinking about this in this frame of like transactional relationships, right? I like it's not sacrifice in a vacuum. She's giving up something now for something better in return, right? Like she is because she believes in Islam. So she actually believes in an afterlife. She believes in Allah. She was the first convert to Islam. She was the first person to pray Salah, like how and it's stupid the way we take teachings from people, right? Like we only will learn from people who have more degrees than us or more wealth than us, right? Like, oh, I don't know what you all do when you go home, right? But like a lot of you will not learn from women, and it doesn't make any sense, right? I think this community is a little different. So when Dr. Marwa is teaching, there are a lot of men in the room as well as women, but there's a bunch of people who they wouldn't go to listen to somebody simply because like she's a woman as a man, and you discount for yourself such gain from somebody like Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. Do you know what I mean? And it applies like in these dynamics of race and class as well, right? There's tons of brown people who wouldn't pray behind a black person. Do you know? They just associate like skin color with religiosity in some capacity, and it's insane. But like, whose sunnah do you follow? The Seerah make things concrete, you know? But understand like just the lived experience. Had she not spent her money on the boycott and supporting people, and she lived with the wealth she had, Allah knows best. Do you think she would have died at 65? Probably not. We don't know. But if not for bankrupting herself and living in a valley for 3 years on like leaves and like exhausting her savings, right? But why does she see it differently? Do you know what I mean? And you have to want to understand first that like I want to see it that way too. I want to see and experience the world in the way she saw it. What is she seeing that I'm missing it? And then second, right? Like, why am I not learning from her? Why am I not taking from her example in a way that I'm like sitting down and not just sharing stories, but lessons and understandings and insights? Do you know what I mean? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say she valued like her soul and her heart more than she valued like materialistic things. I think she realized that like what she was doing was bigger than herself. And I can only imagine too, because like you can see it with others when they help. Like just that like pure like it's like an ecstasy feeling that you get, like that doing that is worth more than any amount of dollar bills in front of it.
Sure. And one could say, well, she was given the glad tidings of Jannah, right? But you know what? You're also told what it is that's an entryway to Jannah, as well as what are the things that are entry points to Jahannam. Do you know what I mean? So, like, is racism a key to Jannah? No. Is oppression and inequity keys to Jannah? Like, no. Gossiping, backbiting, lying, cheating, right? Can we stand in front of Allah and say, you know, Allah, I thought not praying Fajr would get me into Jannah. Do you know what I mean? But also on the other end of it, right? Like the companions asked the Prophet about a woman who prays beyond her daily prayers, gives a lot in charity, but her neighbors are harmed by her tongue. And the Prophet says, La khayra fiha, hiya min ahlin nar. There is no good in her. She is from the people of fire, right? And then they talk about a person. They say, what about this woman who she's just doing like what she's supposed to do, the minimums, but nobody is hurt by her. And he says, Hiya min Ahl Jannah, she's from the people of paradise, right? So when you read a hadith like this, it's like, well, which one do I want to be? And if I'm doing the former and like people are hurt by my tongue, like purposely, consciously, do you know? It's not like we haven't been given the tools for it, but like she has iman in this thing, right? And how do you know? Like her actions demonstrate her convictions and belief. So in that moment, when I am choosing other than what Allah has told me to be true, which you cannot reduce only to practice, but inclusive of practice, I'm making a determination in that frame. And Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, she wasn't having any of that. She was in it and she knew what she believed. How could their daughter not be one of the best of creation? Her father is the best of creation, and her mother is one of the best women ever created. Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha. Do you know? Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, she bore 6 children to the Prophet. Qasim, who is like the basis of the Prophet's kunya, right? That he is known as the father of Qasim. Do you know? And Abdullah were 2 boys. Both of them passed. Then you have Ruqayya, Kulthum, Zainab, and Fatima. 6 children come from Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. And then amongst them is Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha, who they called her like Abiha, the mother of her father, so close to the Prophet of God, like a beautiful relationship. We have immense access to teachings to inform practice from these people, you can't treat these things as stories. You got to sit and reflect and think out, well, what made them who they were, and how are there transferable modes that I can then start to execute and implement within my life. She knows what she believes in, and it becomes a necessary variable to then understand sacrifice in a different prism, or like a relationship in a different prism, right? Any facet of engagement in a different prism. You got to figure out what you actually believe in. It's not going to look the same way always necessarily, because we have different variables that come into play that might create challenges and struggles for us. May Allah make it easy for us. So you don't want the consequence of the belief to be the goal alone, but you want to first formulate a sense of what am I buying into from a conviction standpoint, and how does that then manifest within the constraints of where I'm at. Do you see what I mean? When Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha passes away, there is no janazah prayer at that time. Like, it hasn't been like delivered. There's no 5 daily prayers, right? Like, they were given prayer, how we talked about beforehand, and we talked about like the nature of that prayer and Jibreel teaching them wudu and like the formulas of prayer itself. So they say like the Prophet himself is in the burial like grave, and he's like lowering his wife's body into the grave, and he gets really, really down. Like, he's sad. This is why we said this is called Am al-Huzn, like the year of sorrow. Huzn, as a definition by the Mufassirin, is the state of sorrow you experience when you lose something that you love, right? And the Prophet lost Khadija and Abu Talib within like a month and a half time span, 40 days. Like, they're back to back. That's a lot of loss to experience simultaneously. And what is his reaction? He gets sad. He gets down. The companions get worried about him, right? He's in a state of grief. Some of us in this room have experienced loss in that way. Some of us are in a place where we experience that loss and we don't know how to adapt to it, which is normal. It's not easy to experience a feeling for the first time in your life, or even in phases where you can now feel feelings a little bit differently. But the consequence of the feeling in the Prophet's life does not create for him an abandonment of the relationship to the one that he loves. But with Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, he does many things to demonstrate still a deep love and connection to her. So again, we don't want to treat these narrations as just things that we know, but we want to ponder and reflect upon how he's creating for himself a sense of healing, while at the same time showing appreciation and love for his beloved. So when like the meat of an animal is slaughtered and they say, who should we send it to? Send it to the friends, the relatives of Khadija, like giving gifts to his beloved's like friends and family members. Why is he doing this? Do you know? And when he is asked about the love that he has for her, like he tells straight up, like, there's nobody that did for me what she did. She stood with me when nobody else would stand with me. She believed in me when nobody else believed in me. And you can look at that as the uniqueness of their marriage, but you can also think about it from the standpoint of, if I want the Prophet to have my back on the day of judgment, like, how am I demonstrating a belief in him? Who cares what anybody else thinks? Who cares? Like, what Orientalistic, what supremacist, what like anti-Black, whatever systems are teaching you about who your Prophet is. This is who your Prophet of God is. He cries years later after a necklace of his wife comes into his hand because he misses her so much. That's how much he loves her. And what is it that she was given to him whole? And what did he give to her in a healthy relationship? She was there like when he has doubt. And then you want to think about it in the frame of what we were talking about a little while ago. People get married for the stupidest reasons. Stupidity. You pass up on amazing individuals who could be great for you because what? My child can't marry a woman who's older than him? My child can't marry someone who perhaps might not be able to bear children in their life? The Prophet married this woman because of her intelligence, her integrity. He knew her to be good and she knew him to be good. It went in both directions. Why do people get married? To do what? Not fit in a formulaic process of success. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to get this degree. I'm going to get a job. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have babies. I'm going to buy a house. No, man, it doesn't fit into this cookie cutter standpoint. You have to believe in Muhammad like as a whole individual. And what he shows us is that there are certain things that are important for a relationship to be healthy, and they need to have compatibility in certain ways. But what renders someone to be compatible is not that we are exactly the same person. He was a poor shepherd. She was a rich woman. He is in his 20s. She is 40 years old. And he loved her so deeply that he wasn't the same as he was while she was alive as he was after she passed away. And you can't give continuity to practices that make no sense. Regardless of what like mom and dad say or what community will say or what grandparents will say, we have a sunnah that we follow for a reason. And you pass up on immense opportunity because we don't marry people that make any sense, because we're marrying the people we're supposed to rather than the ones who are going to be good for our hearts. And that sense of belonging community is remarkable. You know, we went to New Mexico like a week or two ago, and we went last year also on a retreat. And some of you were with us this year, right? And some of you came last year. And for those who didn't go, one of the places we go to is a cemetery that is built by like a small local Muslim community that helped build this masjid at this retreat center, Dar al-Islam. And they take their communal responsibilities very seriously. So they've also just built by hand a masjid in the front yard of like a shared unit of homes, as well as a place to wash and shroud bodies. And one of the older women that is part of that community, she said, like when she was asked, how does it feel? Like they have a small cemetery. It's like, the town is like home to 160 people, like its official population. It's not a large town, do you know? And she said, like when she was asked, well, what is it like to have a cemetery next to your house? She said, we live here now, like pointing to her house. And she says, soon we're going to live here. You know? And you live in a society that very purposefully places old people in homes far away, that's afraid of mortality. The Prophet literally got in the grave and put his beloved in the ground. You know? And they understand like what this stuff means. Do you see what I mean? And as he's going through it, he now experiences what is the normal set of emotions after someone passes. It's like a sorrow. Other things we can extrapolate from this: don't wait till somebody dies to realize how important they are in your life. And the same notions that have us chasing after what is quote unquote like the most acceptable spouse for us also has this chase after dunya in ways that you don't want to be in a latter stage of your life in a state of remorse, saying, I wish I hadn't worked so hard, or spend time with the people that I care about, or that I love, or that I know love me. And they were together like all the time. And as a gift that he has. And they make time for their friends. They make time for their companions. You can't say I don't have time for it. What you're saying is it's not important to me. Do you know? And it's hard when you're in a place where there's now not like a dunyawi relationship that says, that person's not here anymore. How can I apologize to them? That person's not here anymore. How can I tell them like I'm grateful for what they did for me? That person's not here anymore. I wish I hadn't fought with them so much or yelled at them or like just dug deep into the things that I dug deep into. They had a beautiful relationship, like an amazing relationship. There's nothing that indicates to us, like in anything, that they even like yell at each other. Do you know? So it's just pure love. Like there's not regret, because how could they have done it differently, right? You don't want regret to be the consequence of somebody passing. And then what is it that I'm left with? Do you know what I mean? So let's take a couple of minutes. You can turn to the person next to you. What's some of the things that are coming up? What are we taking away? And then we'll come back and kind of discuss a little bit, in relation to the passing of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. But go ahead.
So like the thing I wanted to say is like
No, there's so many things I want to discuss.
We're going to pray Isha after we wrap up, just so people know. Isha's going to come in like 10 minutes. So, yeah. But go ahead. Yes, sir.
Both of their restless beautiful, and that's a beautiful gift. Like I don't know. My brain is just like their love is so graceful. I don't know what like inside my head I'm like making the love with someone. I think I was like crying.
everything she possessed, we use in our modern day.
I mean, it goes both ways. Like, why would she support him if there's no love? Yeah, I just really felt like there's no. It's not about she still doesn't know. She doesn't know who's angel of is right now. Like she doesn't know any of that. She's just hearing the words. She's getting very close. She's like how my husband that, and I really good like all this quality I'll show it with his actions. Yeah. Like we can always think about it like how they should accept Islam. I think it's like what would you do in your position? Like if your husband or your partner, whoever like goes to like what would be your first reaction?
He probably made her feel safe and respected enough to give
Praise her. But we also have to think that like yeah, she may have qualities that are like we also have to show that's like hey like you can also romanticize each other's life. You also have
Okay, so what are some of the things that we're taking away? What's coming up for people? That we can hear from a few people.
We're when Islam speaks about most of the prophets, most of them had revelations. They also did things that us humans couldn't do, like move mountains, float water. But in like modern day, like when we look for someone to kind of like replicate, Khadijah would be one that she didn't have special powers. Her special powers was a commitment to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And it's like her commitment to him, her commitment to Islam, and to fellow people. Like there's someone that we could relate to in modern times would be her. Because we could all do that. There's nothing that she did that we can't do to make us a better, Muslims.
Yeah. Other thoughts? Yeah.
I want to like talk about like how our masjids at times are like very disrespectful to women. Like they do not have enough space to pray. Oftentimes, they've been told you don't have to pray Jummah, you don't have to do Tarawih. Even in some places, they do not have enough space for women to do Eid Salah and whatnot. And so, which is like kind of like antithetical to Islam, considering, as you said, we all know that Khadija was the first person who kind of like converted to Islam, right? So even like during in some masjids, in khutbahs, like her name never comes up. Fatima's name never comes up. And so, yeah, I was kind of like reflecting on it a little bit. How can we like step away from that kind of thinking going forward?
Yeah, I mean, one, I would say as a man, you should probably ask women what they want as opposed to assuming it, right? And like what are probably the most obvious gaps or just the beginning of what are actually experiential gaps. How do you kind of understand the needs of somebody without speaking to them or talking to them? But yeah, it's a very real thing, right? Yeah, go ahead.
We were discussing how the Prophet and the Khadija how they demonstrated emotions. A lot of times emotions are looked upon as weakness and all that stuff, but him showing his emotions and expressing them shows like that's part of his perfection, and that's part of like also the greatness of the Khadija radiallahu anha, that and the Sahaba did this too. Like we were saying, like a lot of times when people pass away in our communities, and not people do it with good intentions, but a lot of times it's like what do you say, like misinformed. And if your loved one passes away, you're crying, you're showing emotion, and it's like, oh, you gotta be, especially with the men, that people do that. Like, you gotta be strong, like it's okay, you gotta be strong, just don't cry. And it's like, why? Like, sometimes crying is strength, right? And the Prophet ﷺ is going and placing in the grave and in front of like other people, men and women, and yeah, I mean it's just the Seerah and like their relationship shows like the depth of the human experience that all of us are trying to get to, right? And so it's very beautiful how Prophet ﷺ expresses emotions in regards to his beloved wife and our mother.
Yeah, it's remarkable. Do you know what I mean? And there are things you can extrapolate, right? Like they have a healthy relationship because they know how to give and receive information to each other. Their communication is good. It's something that you got to work on. And they had a pre-existing relationship as employer and employee that builds now into a sense of like, well, what do we share internally and find like attractive in that regard? Intelligence, like, success, but like honesty, integrity, and then the opportunity. Like, think about if you have a very inundating, heavy experience, as the first revelation is, who would you go and talk to about it? When you're feeling really heavy and you're feeling really down, and how many of the people that you turn to, they like put you down for your thoughts. They like offer solutions as opposed to just saying like, I'm here with you in this. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're not alone. Do you know? I don't have an answer for you. But she doesn't say like, oh, I know what that was. That was an angel and this is Quran. She's just like, we're doing this together. You're not by yourself. Like, it's empathetic listening. Do you see what I mean? Other takeaways from today before we kind kind of wrap up. You want to say something? Yeah.
Yeah. You were talking about like choosing like some of us miss out on like a spouse because for all of the wrong reasons. It was reminding me of a quote that was saying like why would you give your heart to anybody that doesn't have a lot in theirs?
Yeah, right. And their basis of their, and this is important to understand because he's hurting after she passes away, but he understands his grief also through the prism of his belief, right? He still believes in another world. Do you know what I mean? Al-maru ma'a man ahab, that a person is going to be with the ones that they love, right? So if you love idiots in this world, you're going to be with idiots in the next world. Do you know? Like, you should be smart about what your heart is getting attached to. If you love spending time with people who all you do is gossip together, then you're going to be with people that you gossip with if that's what you love. May Allah protect you and all of us, right? The persons are going to be with the ones that they love. Do you know? And this is a key takeaway from this. It's a lot different to exert your potential when your intentionality is still rooted in love of some kind. That if you know why you're doing what you're doing and you can attach that to love, a love for people, a love for family, a love for friend, a love for yourself, do you know? That enables you to get up and do with discipline that isn't about accomplishment when things are easy, but accomplishment even when it's inconvenient and it's hard. You know what I mean? The Prophet doesn't stop being the Prophet. Like, he keeps going and he experiences a real tough experience and he's still honoring like what he is honoring, demonstrating who he is, but also like it's not in a vacuum. He believes in something. Do you know? It's really hard when your belief is just on your tongue and it's not in your heart. And if you don't sit and think deeply, not about like rotely memorized creed, but about actual faith in something. Like, what do you have faith in, right? And he has faith in her and who she is and what she offers to him. She has faith in him in ways that we can't even imagine. What is it that they shared together? Do you know? But when you think about like, what is it that I attribute to successful relationships, successful companionship, success in terms of different things, are these like the priorities that one would look at? I can't imagine a person that would be more beautiful than the Prophet of God, let alone like our mother Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. And you got to sit and think in your heart, what is it that somebody sees the world through in terms of perceived deficiency? How can you marry her? She's like 30 something. What if she can't have a kid? Do you know? And this is what they did to him at numerous occasions. Only Halima Sa'diya sees like what nobody else saw. And they don't know like why her animal is the fastest and is like getting fatter in a famine and everybody else's animals are going hungry. And they're, where are you grazing your animals? The source of their barakah is the best of creation. That all of them saw him as a fatherless child and they were more worried about like who's going to pay us. And in the midst of it, they missed out on the opportunity of having the best of creation in their home. And the source of that barakah, don't pass up on it because you're getting distracted by like the glitter of a dunya that's purpose is to distract you. And the 2 rak'ahs that you're missing that are worth the entire world and everything in it, of the sunnahs of Fajr, let alone what the fara'id are worth. It's not worth it, man, in exchange for the dunya that you're gaining as a result. He knows what he believes in, and she helps him to be reinforced in that, right? I wish I could do this for my wife. It's not a narrative that's like, what does a wife do for a husband only? It's what a spouse does for a spouse. Do you know? And how do I root that in anything? I can't give to my loved ones like a sense rooted in conviction if I don't know what I actually have conviction in. Do you know? And when he's getting up and the world is heavy and everything's tough, like he knows he's going to be with her again. He has that belief and conviction. It doesn't make it easier to be separated from his loved one. And then the last piece I'll say on this, the things that we do that disrupt contentment because we engage in what renders complacency makes it harder for us to be able to actually recognize love in its fullest capacity. It's an experience of the heart. And if your heart is now confined through the engagement of haram, which is not a judgmental comment, but understanding the metaphysical consequences, Shaitan has us chase after quite often what we already possess. Adam, peace be upon him, he's told, you could have anything, don't eat from the Shajaratul Khuld, the tree of eternality. And he eats from it. But what's it going to do for him? He's already in Jannah, right? Iblis is tempting him to be in pursuit of something he already possesses. And when the dunya tells us to be dissatisfied with what we have, and we're always trying to get something else to experience the novelty of something, we pass up on a lot of things that can be what it is the source of love to give us that courage that gets us up and gets us going and gets us moving and makes us want to take care of ourselves also. Because if someone like that loves me, then I can love myself too. And it's really hard to love fully, not because we're not receiving it, but because we don't like ourselves so much. And sometimes I can't see myself fully because I'm trying to gain the approval of those who fundamentally I should care less what they think about me. Do you see what I mean? There's a lot that we can take from the life of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. You want to spend some time like going in detail, revising and reviewing, not because the story changes, but you should have change in your life and in different phases of your life. The narrative should then speak to you differently. So take time and then reflect. What do I take from her life? What does it give to me in terms of indication of how I should be living? Right? And the Prophet of God, he experiences this back to back. They have now what is the year of sorrow, Am al-Huzn. We're going to talk next time about some of the other things that come up in terms of difficulties that he experiences as he's now gaining the foundation for ultimately what is going to lead towards the establishment of Medina a few years later. But there's like some other things that are going to come up in the way. So next week, just so we're all on the same page, because Maghrib is getting a little earlier, Dr. Marwa has her class at 6. Like, you should definitely come for it, right? It's really amazing, like, that we have on our staff a clinical psychologist whose methodology is rooted in a psycho-spiritual model of care, right? Many communities don't have access to someone like this. And a lot of us are not happy because we're not inwardly healthy. Do you know? So you want to come, like, listen to what she's sharing about how emotional wellness and spirituality connect. Regardless of what time she stops next week, because Maghrib is going to be like another 5-7 minutes earlier, we won't start till after Maghrib again. And we'll probably do that for a few weeks. And then there'll be a time when Maghrib is like towards the end of her class that she might need a little bit of a buffer, but it'll be like in this like 7 to 7:30 range that we start. And we'll go till Isha time so we can all pray Isha together. Does that sound fine? Okay, so let's take a pause here. If somebody wants to call the adhan for Isha, and people can make wudu, we'll see everyone next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.